guys, today I have this spiced bronzed makeup look for you. It's a beautiful kind of rosy orange with a gold flip on the eyes, and then we've bronzed up the skin, keeping with that spice tone. A perfect look for the festive season. So to start with, on my skin, I'm going to use the very Valentino Light Lasting Perfecting Foundation. I've just pinned my hair up and out the way, so it's a little bit curly-whirly at the moment. I slept in my heatless curls last night, so it's very bouncy at the minute, but it will look a little bit more relaxed towards the end of the tutorial. I have used this foundation in a few tutorials recently. I really love the coverage. I love how natural it still looks on the skin, but it still gives a flawless airbrushed finish. And it's almost like a semi-matte finish, which is great because I'm oily through the T-zone. Before we set any of that in place, we're going to sculpt the skin using this SOSU contour stick. I reach for this a lot, but you can see why when I'm blending it out, it really does melt into the skin. The shade I'm using is cool, but it's not so cool that it's ashy. It's just the perfect neutral tone in my opinion. So as you can see, I've popped this around the hollows of the cheeks, a little bit down the nose, around my hairline, a small amount on either side of my chin. You can also take it under your jaw if you prefer. And then I'm using my BK Beauty 106 round top foundation brush, and I'm just pressing that into the skin, making sure I'm only blending over the areas that I've applied that colour, rather than trying to work it in circular motions and blend it all out, because that's when you kind of distort the sculpting process, and then rather than achieving definition, instead you end up with a bit of a muddy mess. So notice that I'm using either a small patting motion or a very subtle swipe, but I'm not really buffing it round in circular motions. I don't want to distort that, and as you can see, the product itself is very buttery. It doesn't take a lot to blend this out. Once you've done the initial blending, go back in with your foundation brush or sponge that has a little bit of the residual foundation in, and when you bounce this over the top, it's going to soften the appearance of your contour. Next, I'm going in with the Huda Beauty Faux Filter Concealer. I know I reach for a lot of the same products, but they're so good, and I realised that if you guys purchase these products, you want to see more than one tutorial using them. So I'm going back in with this because it is a favourite of mine, and I'm using this to softly bring forward a few areas on the face, so highlighting them in a slightly brighter shade, while also correcting and adding a little bit more coverage where I need it. So an example of that is this area here. As we age, it tends to get a little bit more red, the temple tends to sink a little bit, so adding extra coverage here will also brighten this area, bringing it more forward, but also correcting some of that redness. Now we've got the majority of our complexion done, I'm going to move straight on to the eyes. I'm using two shades from the McGrath Divine Rose Mothership palette, and I understand that this is an expensive palette, and if you have a dupe for any of these shades, then please feel free to reach for them. I predominantly chose this palette for this exact shade. It's called Rose Venus and it is stunning. It's like a rosy orange gold flip, and I personally think it goes on best when you apply it with your finger, but you can definitely use a brush. If you do decide you want to use a brush, use one with tightly dense packed bristles, and then you will get a better payoff. You can also use these eyeshadows wet, but I found with this particular colour, it doesn't really make a difference whether it's wet or dry, you kind of get the same result. So I'm just going on with it dry, but you can apply it wet. You can see as I move my face around, you can see that shift between those colours, which is so beautiful. And these tones really remind me of the sweets we had as kids. Do you remember the fruit salad sweets? These are the same colours. Using a small brush, I'm patting on the shade Skin Show Nude as a soft highlight. It's like a very soft golden beige, and the finish is like a metallic sheen. It's so pretty. So this is going on the inner corner of the eye, and then I'm also going to pop a very small amount on the brow bone, so right underneath the arch of your eyebrow. And the key with any brow highlight is to really buff it into the skin so there's no frosted finish. To keep the skin very cohesive, I'm going to pop a little bit of my bareMinerals Endless Summer Bronzer through the socket of the eye. I don't want the eyes to kind of be too stark and bright. We want something very subtle through the socket to break up the shade between the brow bone and the colours we've got on the lid. This will just tie in that bronzy finish that we're going to have around the circumference of our face with our eyes. I'm using a tapered blending brush because this makes blending so much easier. The tip of the bristle sits in the socket and you only have to do window wiper motions to really get that where you want it. Then I'm also pulling that colour out in a bit of a V shape, but keeping it very soft, just to lift the eye on the outer corner, almost to blend into that contour that we put in the temple area. Going back to the Rose Venus shade on a small, densely packed bristle brush, I'm buffing that underneath my lower eyelashes. I believe this is a smudger brush by ZOEVA, and I will link this as well as all the other products I've used in the description bar so you guys can buy directly through the video. Now I'm going to deepen the outer third of the top lash line and the lower eyelash line, and to do that I'm going to use this Seamless Glide eye pencil by Eldridge in the shade Ground Coffee, so it's a lovely matte brown. So that's going on the waterline, along the top lash line and slightly underneath the lower eyelashes. We're going halfway across, but the majority of the colour will kind of be predominantly on the outer third because we're keeping that really close to the root of the eyelashes as we get to the centre of the eye. So use a small smudger brush to start working that directly over where you've applied it but at the seam. So you might want to have a clean towel or tissue to the side that you can buff your bristles onto to remove any of the excess build up on those bristles, and then continue to blend over the seam. So we're not blending it up and out, instead we're just blending over where we've applied it. We want it to be slightly softer, but we don't want to get into a muddy mess. So keep something to the side that you can keep cleaning your bristles on in between blending, and then you'll get this beautiful soft finish that stays in the shape that you've applied it. You can also do this with eyeshadow if that gives you a little bit more confidence. I prefer to use a pencil, and you can also top this with eyeshadow, but the pencil itself should stay in place as long as it's long wearing. After applying some mascara, I'm going to go in with these tiny individual lashes. I don't want anything that's going to overpower the delicate eye makeup that we've got on, but I want something just to extend the length of the natural lashes. So these little individual lashes are great for that. They can be a little bit fiddly, so take your time with it and just be patient. Sometimes you just need to wait for that glue to go a little bit tacky before you apply it, and then they should stay where you've put them. Sometimes they can slightly fall down, which has happened to me at the end of the video, but sometimes it means that there's not enough glue on that individual lash. You'll also notice that I have a tiny bit of mascara blobbed on the eyeshadow. The key with that is to wait for it to fully dry before you remove it with a cotton bud. Moving back onto the complexion, I'm taking my bareMinerals Endless Summer Bronzer on an angled brush by Morphe, and I'm pressing that over the area that we already applied our cream contour. If you are happy with your contour as it is, you can just set your skin and you're good to go, but if you need a little bit extra, which tends to be the case once your eye makeup's done, then you can go in with your powder bronzer like I'm doing here. So the key is just to trace over the areas that you've applied your contour. Sometimes your bronzer can be ever so slightly higher on your cheekbones. The idea with contour is it sits in the hollows of the cheeks, and bronzer is just a little bit higher. Rule of thumb is to apply anywhere the sun would naturally hit. Moving on to blush, I'm going to take this Nude Sticks Nudies Bloom in the shade Rusty Rouge, which is perfect with the top I'm wearing and the shades that we've got on the eyes. I like to buff this onto the back of my hand and work from there. I'm using my IT Cosmetics No. 7 brush, and I'm pressing this on between the bronzer and where we put our concealer earlier. This is quite a blushy look, which I don't often do, but I feel like as the eye makeup's quite delicate and the top I'm wearing is quite strong, I feel like you can get away with a bit more of a blushy cheek. Again, the key with this is a patting stipple motion to blend this in. I'm now going to minimise some shine through the centre of the face using that Charlotte Tilbury Airbrush Flawless Powder, but if you are particularly oily, then use a setting powder first and then go in with this finishing powder for that airbrushed finish. You can also use this around the seams of your blush just to soften everything. On my lips, I am obviously going to reach for MAC Spice Lip Pencil. This is the perfect pencil shade to match what I've got going through the socket of the eyes, on the cheeks, and the top I'm wearing. As you know, I'm not a huge fan of lip colour in general, but especially lip liner, so I'm not going to overline my lips. Instead, I like to keep it to the exact shape of my lips, and then I like to go with a brush just to soften the inside slightly. I'm not going to buff the outer edge because I don't want that blurred finish to the lips, but I am going to fill them in with the same blush that we have on the cheeks. I like to just coat the top lip and then press it down on my bottom lip so that we don't get an oversaturation of colour. Then I'm going to take a little bit of the Rose Venus eyeshadow and pat that on top. That way when I move my face, I get a beautiful shift of colour that matches the eyes for that monochromatic finish. And that completes today's makeup look. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you have a wonderful Christmas. And I'm going to try and fit in a New Year's Eve makeup look just before the end of the year. As always, everything that I've used will be listed and linked in the description bar. Please subscribe if you are new to my channel. Come follow me outside of YouTube over on Instagram at ShowMeMakeup, and I will see you in a couple of days with another video. Bye guys!